Going to be so excited to share something with you that's going to be in the new book. As you know, just recently got a book deal, and it's going to be called From Conflict to Courage: How to Stop Avoiding and Start Leading. And a lot of my subscribers and clients have helped me to choose that title. We're now in the process of looking at what the book cover is going to look like. And today I'm going to share something that's going to be in the book. It's a chapter in the book. We're going to be talking today about leadership identity. The idea here is that identity drives behavior. So the way that you see yourself is going to be the way that you behave. And we're going to talk about the different ways that leaders see themselves and how new leaders see themselves and what identity has to do with this. And good morning, people. I want to say hi to you as you come in. Give people a moment to join. If you're here, say hi. Let me know where you're from. I get a lot of people from across the country, if they can fit it into their time zone. And so I'd love to hear from you, and feel free to chat with me while I'm doing this. And I'm learning how to multitask and get over here and see what you're saying. And it really adds to my understanding of what you're going through. So feel free as we go through this. So we're going to talk about identity and about how when you become a leader or when you elevate one or two steps up, there's a certain death that happens because you have to leave behind the way you saw yourself. You have to acquire some new skills, some new thought processes, and that can be really difficult because we live in our own brain and body, and we don't realize that how we're seeing ourselves is how we're showing up to our employees, inside of our company, and to the world. And I love reinvention. I've done a lot of reinvention in my own life, and I work with leaders who are going through reinvention. And what I see happen when people get another elevation is that they adopt sort of a dysfunctional style sometimes. I'm going to talk about those here in a minute. Hi there from Oklahoma. Thanks for joining me, Elizabeth. Excuse me. And so I'm going to talk about the three dysfunctional styles that I see to give you a snapshot of maybe what's going on for you if you've elevated or if you've got leaders underneath you that are struggling a little bit in the role. So the first dysfunctional style that I see is best friend leaders. And what happens is that this leader really cares about being liked. They probably really care about people. When they went from one of them to one of us, they still saw their peers as their friends, perhaps. And there's nothing wrong with being friendly, but what happens is you get trapped in this kind of thought process of, well, if I have their back, they'll have mine. And there's this overemphasis on being their friend. And then what happens is you get this misalignment with what you have to do in the organization. And what happens is that when you get into a conflict because they're going against the rules or because now you have to make some tough decisions, now you're kind of at that crossroads where you have to decide, am I still their friend or do I need to discipline? And it's real easy to start covering for people. And so here's some of the traps that I see, and I've got some bullet points here I'll look at. So I don't leave anything out. But one trap I see is getting caught in the hearsay. Maybe there's someone that leader really likes, that was their really good friend before, and that person is feeding secret information. What we call it brown nosing when I was a worker. And so what happens is you start listening to hearsay and someone representing what everybody else is saying, and that is a big trap because sometimes people have their own agendas. Or maybe you can't really get to the root of the problem because you're listening to the gossip and you're just too entrenched in the personal relationships. Or when I see leaders at this level, they kind of blame upper management for the decisions. And so they'll say, okay, everybody, I don't really agree with this, but upper management is making me implement this policy. Therefore, it looks like you're not aligned with the upper level. And so you're still competing in that them against us, and you have to be aligned to the higher level. And even if you don't agree with it, that's kind of backstage stuff. And then another trap that I see in the best friend leader is having what I call global conversations. There's one person that's causing the problem, but instead of addressing that person, having a difficult conversation that includes accountability, we have a meeting for everybody and we say, now, we all need to really do this or that, or we need to come in on time, or we need to make sure the documentation is filled out, whereas everyone else is doing it. There's just one person that isn't. So that's one of the traps of seeing yourself as a best friend and becoming that best friend leader. That happens a lot of times when someone gets a promotion and it's their first time to actually be in charge as a designated leader and with the role and title of a leader. The next one is hero leader, and some people never leave this. This is leaders that love to help. And what happens is they take on other people's success, and they create this dependency because they want their success more than the individual wants their success. It becomes very dysfunctional. It creates a lot of resentment. Excuse me. I see a lot of people saying, "Good morning," that's LinkedIn users, and I'm sorry that your name's not showing up. Maybe it's that you have to follow. I'm not sure how that happens, but thank you for joining me. Anyone from out of town, I'm in Springfield, Missouri. So if you're from another country or you're from out of town, I'd love to just have you pop in and say hi so that I know you're there. So we're in the hero leaders. What happens is they become unwilling or unable to delegate. They just want it to get it right. They want that person to be successful, and they're afraid of someone making a mistake and it falling on them sometimes. They sometimes take credit instead of giving credit because they love to be the one that figured it out. This can be an ego issue of, I was so good at my job and now I have to let other people be good at that job, and I need to mentor them instead of me taking credit. Sometimes the open door becomes a revolving door. They love to solve people's problems. People come, they ask problems, they have problems, and they want their leader to fix the problem. Hi, Tracy. Thanks for joining me. And I'm just wondering if any of you that are watching, have you seen any of these patterns of best friend leaders or hero leaders? Feel free to give your comments. If you see this in your organization with leaders that are under you, or if you're saying, you know what, I kind of fall into this trap. I care more about their success than they do. And it's okay that you do. Awareness changes everything. There's never any judgment in the work that I do. It's all about awareness and choice, because I believe in empowerment. I believe that we're the creative force of our own lives. So it's all good. Hi there, Assad. Thank you. It's good evening there. Hey, it's morning here. So thank you for joining me in the nighttime when it's relaxation time. So the hero leaders, they create overly dependent employees, and they don't realize why that's happening, and it's happening because they don't know how to back up. Gorgeous in British Columbia. Oh, I hope to go there someday. All right, so now we have two. We've got the best friend leader, we've got the hero leader, and then finally we have, and this can be someone that's been in leadership for a long time, or it can even be a brand new leader, but I call it the hands-off leader. And this leader is not a micromanager. In fact, the pendulum has really just swung too far. And they're not even aware of some of the looming problems because they're saying, well, I trust my people to do what they're going to do, and I don't really want to be in the weeds. But I think that goes too far most of the time, because you need to have a pulse on what's happening, not to micromanage, but so that you won't get caught off guard. You know, there's plenty of trust here, but what I see missing a lot of times is the accountability in the hands-off leader. And that is really a problem for some really great leaders that just are afraid to get in the weeds, don't want to micromanage. So I think you have to build a definition for micromanaging, and to understand that no matter who is under you, it's still your responsibility, even if it's their job. So your job is to mentor them and make sure they're making good decisions so that you're not caught off guard. And so those are the hands-off leader. I want to talk about some of the ways to identify that. They kind of brush complaints under the carpet. You know what? They'll figure it out. They've all got a job to do. I've been called in on cases to work and to do some investigation, and a lot of it was just due to the leader not knowing what was going on at leader levels below them. Changing the structure before actually talking to employees. And what I mean by changing the structure, I call it playing chess with the chess pieces. You take a piece and you move it over here, you move it over here to try to get people to get along. And I'm totally going to be talking about working with the physical environment and the invisible structures of the environment in the upcoming book. But what I know is that when you start moving someone maybe to a different cubicle, a different department, a different shift, you're doing that because you don't want to have a conversation. And you need to be able to have conversations with people, not from the place of lecturing, but from curiosity to find out what's going on. And so what happens is there's this failure to assist the lower level leaders when a problem occurs. And if you don't have conversations, you won't know what problems are going on. And you need to know. If you are over other leaders, if you're like a director or vice president, you need to know what's going on at the levels below you and not to discount the problems that those leaders are having. The inability to see the role that leaders play in drama. I can't tell you how many times I get a phone call or an email or request from a senior level leader that wants me to come in and do a workshop for the employees who aren't getting along. And while it seems like that may be the issue, 90% of the time there's some leadership issues attached to that. People do what they do because it works. And we always want the kids to behave better, but we don't want to look at what mom and dad is doing, so to speak. And this isn't to judge leaders. It's just to say that if you ever do hire a consultant or you want to work with someone like me, it's good to have an idea of what you think's going on, but don't get into problem solving before you've talked with the expert that knows kind of how to help and what to look for. Because when you're problem solving, you're looking for workshops, you're looking for things that you think is going to fix it, when in reality, the root may be a little bit deeper, maybe a leadership identity issue. So I have some North Star advice for anyone that's in leadership, and it works up and down. And the North Star advice is this: no blindsiding. I've written a lot of articles about blindsiding and being blindsided. If you want to go to Smart Brief, if you look up Smart Brief on leadership plus Marlene Chisholm, you'll find some of my thoughts on that, because I obviously see a lot of blindsiding when I go into organizations. I see blindsiding from the standpoint of an employee or a middle level leader that their job is on the line because they were supposedly doing something wrong, but the pulse wasn't there. No one knew what was going on. They didn't have training. And now all of a sudden a big complaint has come up with maybe EEOC or just something that looks really serious. And now they're being blindsided. But the truth is they didn't have any leadership development or mentoring. And I also see the other kind of blind side where an upper level leader, a vice president, a CEO, a director, they get blindsided by the behavior of a leader below them that was moving those chess pieces around or avoiding conflict in order to not look bad. So what I want to say is that go ahead and ask people above you for a little bit of mentoring. Being competent, it will make you look really conscious. So that's my advice for not blindsiding. And so I want to talk about creating an aligned identity and give you just a little bit of what's going to come up in the next week. I'm going to do another LinkedIn Live at the same time on Tuesday, 9 o'clock. And I'm going to give you actually some steps for yourself or for your employees. And you're welcome to share these. These are steps that are going to be in the book. So it will be in printed form at some point. But I will share some ways that you can start becoming a leader that's aligned with an identity that you want to create. So I've got the little scrolling of the name of the book, so you can kind of keep watch for that. It's going to be out next March, so it's a long time from now, but it feels like I'm working fast and furious. And I think this part about leadership identity is particularly interesting because I've done a lot of identity work on myself, and I've helped a lot of other people see themselves differently so that they behave more confidently and have clearer communication, better able to have a meeting, better able to direct people where they want to go without losing their temper. All of this is really rooted in identity, the way you see yourself. Now, you want to create an aligned identity when you're a leader. And there's 3 different, concepts or ways that identity shows up. So I want to share those. And then next week, we'll talk about some steps on how to change some of your identity. I got someone that's got a question here, so I want to see it. I'd be curious to see your recommendation for a scenario that the upper leadership decide on an orientation as a leader was not consulted and need to land this orientation that we are not comfortable with. What do you suggest a middle leader to do? That's really a great question, and I really thank you for that. It's always about conversation. And I would say also, get really curious. Get curious as to why they chose that and ask them if they've thought about the fallout and tell them you've been thinking about it and you'd like to come and share some information. You may not do that on the first conversation, but you might go and say, I think I have some concerns about this, but I want to fully understand your thinking. It's not fair for you to know something and not bring it forward. But at the same time, I know that you have a razor's edge that you need to walk in, that you come wanting to collaborate, not to make them wrong, but to maybe adjust the way that they do things. And they need to understand your point of view. They get the final say anyway, but if you come from curiosity to try to understand why they feel the way they do, that might help you, but it might help you to also say, look, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you some of my concerns. Let me know if you'd like to hear those. I'm glad to set up a meeting. You want them to invite you to share those concerns. So I hope that that helps you, and get with me later. I'd love to hear the result of that and even more detail about it. Maybe that'll even make it in my book. I think it's very interesting what you've brought to the surface here. So there's 3 different leadership identities that happen. So the first one is that you see yourself as a leader, but others don't. This is the person that is either not getting the respect they want, or they're not getting the elevation. They're not getting they didn't get the raise. They're not getting the opportunity to lead in a certain role, and they wonder why they're getting passed up. If that's what's happening, you need to look at how others are seeing you and what is that in your behavior? What is that in your own strategy that's not getting you where you want to go? That's self-awareness. That's asking other people. That's making it clear where you want to go. So that's really frustrating. If you see yourself as the leader, you see yourself as worthy, what are you doing to hide your light? What are you doing to not show up in a way that others are recognizing? Then there's this one. Others see you as a leader, but you don't. Now that's the person who just got promoted, and they're not like, oh, I didn't realize that. Yes, I'm a good worker, but now they're seeing me as a leader and I've not fully grasped that. I think lots of times that's because there was no orientation into leadership. There was no, I don't call it a ladder, but like maybe there's a certification, then there's a shadowing, and then there's mentoring. Maybe there's a series of steps that is not happening in your organization. And therefore, when someone's thrown into leadership, they feel totally off guard, like they don't feel ready for it. That's really tough. And that's mostly what I'm talking about today, is that leadership identity. I haven't owned it. I don't have a definition for leadership. I don't know what is really expected of me other than a role and a title. And now I feel that I've got more responsibility, but it's more than that. And so you have to look at that. If others see you as a leader, but you don't, what do you need to do? And what do you need to recommend to your organization so they can start getting people prepped for leadership versus throwing them into it? And then finally, the best one, this is where you want to be. This is where you see yourself as a leader and so do others. Well, how do we get there? How do we start to see ourselves as leaders and then others go, you're a leader, and it's very aligned. We all agree. That's when you can really make things happen. That's when it starts being exciting and fun, and you can start really building yourself into your skill sets and elevating all your skills and then delegating. That's when leadership becomes really, really fun. And people that are there, they love leadership material. They love to read about it. They love to hear from other people. They love to teach. That's an awesome journey. And I hope all of you are experiencing that kind of journey right now. So next week on Tuesday, I'm going to give you some of the steps. If your organization isn't helping you to adopt a new identity, I'm going to give you some steps that you can work on for yourself, because it doesn't matter if you stay with the organization you're in right now. If you can build these skill sets and these ways of being within yourself, you can be a leader anywhere. So thank you so much for joining me. And I'd love to hear your comments. And if you're joining later, please let me know that you watched by putting your name and where you're from, maybe a tip that you got from today. And next week, I'll see you and I'll give you some steps on how to start creating an aligned identity. Thanks for joining me.